Welcome to Sat Chats, the Bitcoin podcast where we chat about sats. Sats are the smallest part of a Bitcoin, the same way pennies are the smallest part of a dollar. We started this podcast to be your Bitcoin welcome center. So if you're a pre-coiner with no Bitcoin at all, we want to chat about sats with you. Head to satchats.com and grab your seat in the studio today. I'm your host, Stuart, Bitcoin Maxi, who wears prescription sunglasses to protect you and your loved ones from my Bitcoin laser eyes.
And I am Chris, your co-host, founder and CEO of Ithaca Hummus, Bitcoin smash buyer and proud multi-coiner.
Bing, bing, bing.
We would love it if you head over to our YouTube channel at SatChats, subscribe, comment on our videos, share them with all of your friends who are Bitcoin beginners, and just engage with us. Help us feed that algorithm.
Smash the like and subscribe button the same way Chris smash buys Bitcoin. Each time you do, a Bitcoiner gets his laser eyes. So today we've got Jay on the show, and we are going to be hearing his Bitcoin story and answering any questions he has about Bitcoin. But before we do, Jay, we want our satillionaires out there in the Sat Pack to learn more about you. Who are you? What do you do? What's your relationship to money? All of it. Do you still have a good relationship with your mom? You know what I mean? What's your blood type?
I'm on and off again relationship with money. You know, sometimes we talk to each other, sometimes we don't, you know? Oh, yes, of course. Name's Jay Becker. Right now, I founded and own a company called Vasker Tech. We're a software development company. We help founders and businesses go from idea to market on time and on budget. I started my Bitcoin journey. I heard about it back in 2017, and I thought it was a joke. Like, okay, I had a buddy that was getting graphics cards to try to mine some Bitcoin. I'm like, okay, yeah. So you run an algorithm and you get money. Sure, buddy. Go ahead. Yeah, let's see where you go. Right. And it wasn't until like the 2020s, early 2020s, like 2020, 2021, that I got really interested in it. Because I came from it from the approach of, okay, this thing is obviously taken off to some extent, right? We're past the, 10K evaluate or, I think it was definitely was past like 10, 20K. And I came from the approach of, I have to prove that this is a bad idea, right? So I was interested in like, okay, where are the holes? Why doesn't this work? Because there's got to be something in here that doesn't add up. And so I read through the white paper. I, did a bunch of research, and the more I went into that, and then I went down this rabbit hole of like Australian, the School of Economics, no, not Australian.
Australian School of Economics is probably sweet, though.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah. So I did a bunch of research. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And it actually started making sense to me. And then I got Bitcoin. And then of course we got some altcoins, the ETH, some other ones that aren't doing so hot right now. And then I got even more into it, and I started doing consulting for businesses to accept Bitcoin as payment, and help them set up like the tech stack that they needed so that they could actually process payments and handle it accordingly. But then we had the NFT craze, and a lot of bad actors, shall we say, entered the space, and it just wasn't very fun for me anymore. And so I still have Bitcoin, of course, but I'm not as engaged as I once was.
So you went through a period of helping businesses accept Bitcoin, but then there were too many crypto sundries and digital items flying around out there that people were claiming to be valuable. And you moved away from that and you started Vasker Tech.
Yes, pretty much. Well, I went away from it mainly because it was too hard. It was getting to the point where it was too hard explaining why crypto was this really cool, awesome technology. And I had to spend more time explaining why it wasn't a scam, because everyone just associates, unfortunately, and I'm sure you find this equally as frustrating, is that people associate cryptocurrency with scam, you know.
Mhm.
And it's really hard breaking through that ice and being like, hey, yes, okay, there's 100% a lot of bad actors, but there's some actual legitimate utility and value behind this. But yeah.
Yeah. And we do run into that, right? We've done, you're number 15, so you will be forever memorialized as number 15J. And the 14 who have come before you, many of them are wondering if it is a scam or what makes it different from other cryptocurrencies. And we found that there were a lot of Bitcoiners who were hoarse in the throat from trying to explain why Bitcoin is the greatest, why it's different from fiat, why it's different from other cryptocurrencies. And they just get tired and say, you know what? Never mind. This is going to the moon no matter what. I'm going to keep stacking sats and I'll just quietly be a billionaire on some sick yacht in the port of a small Italian town. And y'all going to be, you know, continuing to go down into the fiat mines each day, wondering why your money buys you less and less and less. So we have energy. We have, you know, what it takes to go out there. And we're both dads, by the way.
Yeah.
And the primary function of a dad is to repeat yourself until your kids finish your sentences for you. So we can talk about Bitcoin all day long.
Yeah.
We can cover the same territory literally all day long. And it's really interesting for us to engage with guys like you, Jay, who have Bitcoin stories. You know, you aren't a pre-coiner. You have Bitcoin. You get Bitcoin. And I'm curious to know a little bit about some of the areas you explored in 2020 or 2021 when you were trying to disprove Bitcoin. Where did you try to poke holes first?
Well, I first had to understand it before I could poke holes, right? So it really started with a fundamental understanding of how Bitcoin works. Like, how does it, like, okay, let's take away all the abstraction and the word salad that I think jargon, and like, how does this function, right? And then once I understood how it functioned, and I'm like, okay, this is how a coin is created. This is how, you know, you send tokens. This is why we don't have to worry about attacks or, you know, things happening. Once I understood that part, then it was like, well, okay, how can I trust this? But then it's not just a matter of how can I trust this. It's, okay, what is the alternatives, right? So if I'm going to be scrutinizing Bitcoin to this level, right, then I should also scrutinize other monetary systems to the same level. And when you look at something like USD, for example, on one hand, it has the backing of, you know, the world's largest superpower, which, I mean, I think that's pretty neat. Don't get me wrong, but Bitcoin is backed by, you know, thousands of decentralized nodes all over the world. I mean, that's really powerful. So, I mean, of course, it's a lot more complicated than that. But if we're just from a really high level, if you just really break things down, it's yeah, like it's a really great monetary system. And you know what? I'll say this: Bitcoin has some downsides. I will be the first to admit that Bitcoin has some downsides. But I think if you again compare it to the alternatives, I think it's the best currency we got.
Okay, that is amazing, Jay. And I want to break that down step by step for our listeners. The one thing that came to my mind that was that you said that I haven't quite heard put this way before is that the USD, aka the United States dollar, is backed by what? It's backed by the world's largest superpower. Wow. And people, you know, we've talked to guests on the show to try to help them understand what backs the US dollar now that it's not backed by gold. And we've come at it from a few different angles, but that's a very easy way to summarize what backs the US dollar, the world's largest superpower, which is pretty neat. That's not bad. I mean, the US dollar isn't backed by Djibouti. You know what I
Better
mean? It's not backed by Guyana, right? And it's backed by America, right? So not so bad. Interestingly enough, I have heard of people labeling those 20,000 plus decentralized nodes as the world's largest supercomputer. And so you do have a nice kind of symmetric juxtaposition where the USD is backed by the world's largest superpower. Bitcoin is backed by the world's largest supercomputer. Mm-hmm. So which one do you want? Now, to step back a little bit, you said your first step was to understand what Bitcoin actually is when you strip away all the analogies and metaphors and stories that we tell each other to try to understand it. This is a hard topic to cover. And it's like, well, where do I start? Do I talk about the protocol? Do I talk about some of the rules in place? Do I talk about how mining works? And, I want to hear from you, Jay, what your explanation of Bitcoin really is when you're talking to a pre-coiner who's like, well, yeah, but what is it? And they want to know like literally what it is. Because my wife wants to know literally what it is. How would you explain that?
The long answer is, I think what makes Bitcoin so valuable is that it facilitates a truly trustless system of money. Every form of money right now requires trust, right? With the SWIFT system, bankers have to trust each other, with just being able to do subscription payments. That's, hey, if you think about it, wait, how does a subscription payment work? Oh, somebody takes money out of my bank account and I only authorize that transaction once, right? And so Bitcoin enables you truly trustless, where you do not have to trust any of the parties involved. Everyone can be malicious and wanting to take your money, and they won't be able to do that. I think that's like utility wise. I think that's great. Then I think the next layer above that is like, okay, it has just a layer of longevity because of that, because it's not tied to one system, one place. It's so decentralized that it can, it'll probably outlast the dollar. It'll last out, every currency, assuming, things happen in their current trajectory, right? But I think ultimately it boils down to, what are you trying to do, and can Bitcoin make you do it better, right? Because that's all tools boil down to, right? We don't understand the Visa network, right? Most people don't. But what they do understand is, hey, if I put this plastic card in that machine over there and hit some buttons, then I can pay for my groceries, and I don't have to bring a wad of cash, right? That's what people understand. And I think one of the greatest advancements for Bitcoin was when with the Silk Road, where you could buy illicit substances offline or online and pay for them with cryptocurrency. Why? Well, because cryptocurrency was the only option that you could do that with. And so having more use cases where Bitcoin just makes a lot of sense, or what you'll see a lot of is remittance payments, where people will use cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, or some other token to send payments across the world really fast and cheap. And so I think, there's the brainy answer, if you will, of okay, here's how this works, and here's the Byzantine problem, and here's why you need to have here's what hashing is, all that stuff. But most people don't care. Most people just want, hey, can this help me do a thing better? And I think I genuinely think that, aside from the investing part, I think that that's one of the areas where I think Bitcoin is really challenging, difficult, is that right now it's not easier. It's not easier to go to a store and pay with Bitcoin. It's not easier to, that's one of the things I was trying to do with helping businesses accept Bitcoin, is trying to break down some of those barriers. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I think that's where we're at, where, if for the random person, they probably don't need to care about Bitcoin. I mean, if they want to invest, obviously, right? But yeah, that's the long answer.
And it's a really good answer. I think what we learned from that, Jay, is that right now you have monetary systems that are effectively broken up into nation states. And you need a lot of trust to be flying around between you and the people you're transacting with and all the banks and credit card networks, etc., in order for that all to work, right? Setting aside the fact that these systems are set up to lose purchasing power over time, just the actual structure of it requires you to have a lot of that trust in place for your data to fly around all these different places. And you have a scenario where the monetary system that you're using inside your nation state may not work inside another nation state, or it may need to go through a handful of filters first, quite often the US dollar, to then work inside the country where you are, right? So it's, I think there are something like 219 nation states right now. The world has kind of crystallized into only 219 forms of government, which for a world of 8 billion people, that ain't very many, is it? But it's still quite a lot, and it makes things tricky. So to your point, it sounds like you're framing Bitcoin up as a global monetary system that can be used to make remittance payments all over the world, any old time you want, and nobody has to trust anybody in order for it to work.
Among many other things, but yes, yeah, I think that's a huge one, right? I think people understand things based off of the problem it solves for them, right? And I think if you want to get the average person, I think the problem that they're solving, I guess it just depends, right? Maybe it's remittance payments, as you're saying. If you're talking to someone who's interested in investing and, hey, making some more money over, the next 10, 20 years, then the problem you're solving is a little bit different. It's, hey, how can I get an outsized return from my investment? And so for that crowd, it's more interested. For those of you listening, if that's your category, then it's more of the problem that Bitcoin's solving for you is getting outsized returns over a long period of time with you having to do absolutely nothing. You don't have to look at any P&L statements. You don't have to attend shareholder meetings. You don't have to do any of that. You can just forget about it. Honestly, it's better if you forget about it. I haven't checked my Bitcoin wallet in months. I have no idea what my stuff is valued at, right? So I think it just depends on the problem people are trying to solve.
Beautiful.
The Satillionaires watching this need to smash like and subscribe on number 15J, because my fellow out there is spitting the hot orange fire.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been trying to help our guests and our viewers understand that one use case for Bitcoin is drop your fiat into Bitcoin, leave it there, and watch it go to the moon without you having to do any more work. And you're like very good at condensing these ideas down into phrases that are easy to understand. I mean, the idea of, hey, do you want outsized ROI without having to do any freaking work other than to let time pass? Go ahead and get you some Bitcoin.
Just let it sit there. Don't check it. I feel like that's such a common mistake that when people first get into Bitcoin, they're constantly watching the price of Bitcoin, and it is not healthy or productive, really. You know, sounds like Jay has crossed the chasm over to the other side.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I know this is probably probably not encouraged here, but I have, with the times I have sold Bitcoin, I've only sold at a profit. So there's always that.
Yeah. Yes.
And we're okay, by the way, for people to sell Bitcoin, because as much as Chris is a smash buyer who's going to Chad Michael Saylor himself into infinity as soon as he's able, and as much as I'm a Safe Dean Maxi who wants people to work hard, earn money, set it aside, and spend only what they literally actually for real have. No funny business, no debt, none of that stuff. Bitcoin is money, right? I mean, yes, it is an excellent investment, and some call it digital gold, and we call it digital gold. And you get those outsized ROIs, and it's all juicy and jazzy, but it's also digital cash, and you truly can sell it in exchange for things you want. I mean, that's literally how money works. You just have to decide how much you want to hang on to it digital gold style, how much you want to deploy digital cash style to fund your lifestyle. And for the Bitcoin maxis like moi, who are out there attempting to convert their entire life from a fiat standard to a Bitcoin standard, once you have fully exited the matrix, you've woken up in your little goo chamber, you get flushed down the pipe, and you're aboard that ship with Morpheus. You will literally need to sell off Bitcoin in order to fund your lifestyle, because you won't have any fiat. Number 14, Robert, my guy only keeps 3 months of cash, and then I think up to 6 months of gold beyond that, and the rest he's putting into Bitcoin and investments, because he knows those dollar bills are melting ice cubes. Now, Chris is going to give you a slight narrowing and furrowing of the eyebrows there, because once he gets himself onto a Bitcoin standard, he's going to take his Bitcoin, he's going to go get a loan with the Bitcoin, he's going to live off the loan, he's going to watch Bitcoin appreciate, he's going to pay off your silly fiat loan, he's going to do it again. This guy's fully the Chad Michael Saylor over here. So, that's where you're getting that facial expression from. But for the safety maxis who are just, we want to operate on a sound money basis, earn, save, spend, that's it. It's okay to sell your Bitcoin, man. That's literally how it works. So we get a lot of guests who do see it as digital gold, but not as digital cash. You spent some time convincing businesses that Bitcoin is digital cash. Tell us more about that experience for you.
Yeah. Well, I think there's still some limitations, and this is kind of sort of why I moved away from this. I think that it works when more people are on the same standard, right? And I think that this is just a problem time will solve. And I think we're just too early right now for it to be universally accepted. I think, I think that for it to really be acceptable, you have to have a majority of people, or not even majority, even like 30%, 30% of people that have Bitcoin and are willing to, when they make a purchase, to actually use that Bitcoin to purchase that good. And typically what that looks like is the business has to offer some incentive to pay with Bitcoin in the first place, right? So that would oftentimes mean, hey, maybe it's something as crazy as, hey, 10% off if you pay with Bitcoin, right? Because, but that also adds other issues, such as, okay, a business has expenses that it has to pay for, right? Normally you aren't, selling something for free unless it's a digital good like software or a course or knowledge material. Oftentimes there's some hard costs. And so then you're going to have to convert your Bitcoin into cash and do that rather quickly, and then be able to, pay whatever hard costs you have. And typically those people won't accept Bitcoin, right? So if everyone in the chain accepts Bitcoin, then it's no problem, right? The problem is that we have these barriers, and every time you cross as you guys know, every time you cross from the Bitcoin to the fiat barrier, you end up paying a lot in transaction fees. And so I think it can really work for some businesses, and I have considered accepting cryptocurrency for Vasker Tech for software development, but I think I can make that work a little bit differently. But anyways, yeah, I think it's too early for that. I really want that. Like, I really would love nothing more. And there's some really cool technology and tools that we use to make the process as easy as it can be. But the problem that is really hard to solve is that, hey, how do we pay people down the chain? And that's, that's a tough problem to solve. Yeah, I have one tool. For those of you listening, if you have a business and you're interested in accepting cryptocurrency, a really awesome tool is called BTC Pay. And it's a open source project that you can self-host. So if you have a little bit of technical know-how, you can set up one of these servers, and it will make paying invoices, and it handles all of that in real time, really fast, really easy. so that it's just for a customer, it's just as easy as paying with cash, pretty much. But yeah, so that's kind of been my experience, is that I think we're just too early for there to be mass adoption of cryptocurrency as a payment standard. Yeah.
When a business needs to take that Bitcoin and convert it into cash to pay downstream cash acceptors, you mentioned there are transaction fees, and I'm assuming you might be talking about, for example, taking your Bitcoin and sending it off to Bitcoin Well, and in exchange, they pay you out cash. Like you might go through an exchange and you sell them your Bitcoin, they hand you cash. You still need to pay to send your Bitcoin from your wallet to their wallet. So you've got some on-chain transaction fees. Yep. Maybe there are some exchanges that will absorb that because they're already kind of charging their spread or what have you, but there's some kind of cost that somebody needs to pay to send the Bitcoin from one to the other.
I think ultimately, though, is that a lot of businesses have rather thin profit margins, right? 10, 15, 20, 30%, right? So if you are incentivizing people to pay with Bitcoin instead of fiat, right? Because, Bitcoin maxers, right? We like paying with fiat. Why? Because it's useless. It's running out. It's going to be more expensive tomorrow than it is today. I'll spend my fiat and stack my sats, right? And so if you want to incentivize that transaction, you have to start off by offering some sort of discount, some sort of incentive to be like, hey, pay with Bitcoin. And so, say that's like, 1, 2, 5%, right? So now you're taking 5% off of your profit margin. All right. And then you have to pay all your base costs. And then by the time, you have that done, the real value in Bitcoin is holding it, right? So you might only be able to hold a small fraction of that. And you won't see a return on that investment for months, years, even, and in business, especially in startup land, that's eternity.
Mm-hmm. So you'd actually be better off just accepting dollars at full price and determining what percentage of my revenue do I want to invest or convert into Bitcoin.
Exactly. And I wish we weren't there. Like, I really wish that wasn't the answer. I wish the answer was yes. I think it's a good, I think we can start and we can offer that for people who can. I know some online shops that take, Bitcoin and Monero, right? So I think it's a good thing to do, and it's a good thing to offer. But I don't think we're at the place of mass adoption and a lot of people being able to accept it as a means of transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So what type of work would you literally do to help a business get set up back when you were doing that? What tech stack? Yeah. Maybe it's changed for now, but just what was your experience, for someone who's curious? What did you do?
Yeah, so there's a couple parts of it. So depending on the business, mostly we worked with digital businesses. And so we would go in and first evaluate, okay, what's your business? Obviously, the basics of what they do, how they work, all that good stuff. Then the next step is we would start with the integration and infrastructure. So if they, sometimes maybe it's just as easy as setting up a BTC pay server, right? But oftentimes it's a little bit more complicated than that. More times that it's making sure that if it's a website, hey, adding that, integrating to whatever, e-commerce or system that they have set up, so that, on the checkout page that they could be able to pay with Bitcoin. Or if, I remember working with a streamer once who wanted to accept Bitcoin on his super chats, right, which is really cool. And so I ended up figuring out how to integrate into that whole stack. So it really just depends on who it was, and yeah, that was pretty much my experience. There's also other tools too that I kind of wanted to use, but there wasn't an excuse to use that I think, depending on where the listeners are at, they might find useful. One of them is, oh gosh, I forgot it. I want to say it's like Bitcoin Wage or something, but it's a system that makes it easier for you to pay employees and contractors with Bitcoin. So that's part of the chain, right? It's like, hey, okay, if a lot of your base cost is labor, as I think it is for most businesses. And if there are people that are like, hey, yeah, I'll take my compensation in Bitcoin, awesome. You can do that. You can take a payment from the customer and then just disperse it out to your employees, and then you don't have to worry about the exchanges, and then that helps on the transaction fees. So yeah, there's a lot of cool tools out there.
That's really fascinating, and it's really interesting to hear about the work you did earlier to try to help Bitcoin be digital cash, right? On this show, we tell everyone yes, Bitcoin is digital gold, but it is also digital cash, and it is the digital unit as well. There are many who feel like the value of Bitcoin is going up so quickly that they don't want to use it as digital cash, even though it is digital cash. Do you have any idea when Bitcoin might flip from digital gold to digital cash? I mean, to an extent, it was almost like digital cash when all the libertarians were, passing it between one another, Silk Road, etc. Then it kind of has matured into digital gold, but eventually it'll become digital cash again. When do you think that'll be?
I think that it's going to happen when the volatility. I think the rate at which it's used as a medium of exchange, as in cash, is a function of volatility. So I think the less volatile it becomes, the more widely it's going to be used, as far as means of transaction. Because it's really hard to use something when it's constantly fluctuating in value, right? And I think you need to be able to think in sats, not in dollars. Because right now you think, oh, okay, this Bitcoin is worth, this item is worth, $10. You need to start thinking, hey, this Bitcoin is worth, 4 sats. I don't know. But for that to happen effectively, the price has to stabilize, and it will always be going up, right? I'm not saying it to just like stagnate, but it needs to be going up at a more predictable and slower trajectory. So I think it's just as time progresses and as we see Bitcoin become less and less volatile, right? It used to be Bitcoin would jump from $1 to $10 and back to $2, and then like it would have all these crazy spikes, and now it's it's a lot less volatile. And I think it's just as there's more liquidity, as the markets are harder to move by single actors, then it's just going to be a much more stable and less volatile. And then I think that's when it makes a lot more sense to use it as a medium of exchange.
Do you think that's 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now?
I have no idea. It could be linked to the halvening. So maybe there's like a point when for those of you who don't know, halvening is when Bitcoin was the amount that miners earn from mining Bitcoin literally halves. And so I forget, but do you know what the price is now?
How much Bitcoin per block mined?
Yeah,
it's 3.125 plus transaction fees. Fifth epoch or fifth epoch.
Got it. Yeah. So I'm assuming that number would have to go a lot smaller. That could be part of it. Again, I don't know. I'm just guessing. And so, yeah, it could be in 8, 12, 16 years, probably a multiple of 4, whatever it is.
Yeah. Because the halving is every 4 years or so. I think so. We don't get shredded alive in TikTok again. We have to point out that it is a function of Bitcoin and happens according to Bitcoin, but it's effectively every 4 years or so. I really think your take on Bitcoin becoming more widely used as digital cash as the volatility decreases is pretty interesting. When it's going up forever, Laura, right? You said it, but maybe it will go up at a more predictable rate because it has matured or what have you. But what happens, Jay, if Bitcoin swallows the world's economy and is like, you know what? Let me go ahead and get all 900 trillion right now. Give it to me. And it's like, I don't care about your law of big numbers. I don't care about your reduced volatility. I'm going up.
Then you're gonna have to find a smaller unit than a sat.
Yeah, dude. What happens if our satillionaires in the chat right now are stacking up 1 million sats and they find that they have 1 million US dollars, after enough time has passed? Like, what happens when the sat reaches parity with the dollar?
I think it'll be a crazy day. I think that'll be really, really cool. I think it's definitely far away off. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be neat. And I think the biggest use for that is it's really easy for people to buy things because they in satoshis and dollars, because it's the same thing, right? It's like, oh, hey, I'll
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the unit of account or being able to price things in Satoshi becomes a much easier, problem for people to solve on the spot.
And personally, if I had 5 million sats, which is like $5,000 today, but we're in a world where my Starbucks coffee is 7 sats. I as a safety maxi, I will likely not run out and go get a fiat loan against my 5 million sats to then have a bunch of worthless paper to then go buy my coffee for $7. I'll probably pay 7 sats for the coffee because it ain't that big of a deal,
Right.
But your boy Chris over here fully will. And
I'll have a line of credit. I just have a line of credit for my cash, and I will essentially borrow out all of my sats and just operate.
Homie's over. Dude, buy, borrow, die. You heard it here first. Chris Kirby for life, y'all. So make sure to like and subscribe. Tell us in the comments if you're a Chad Michael Saylor, Chris Kirby, buy, borrow, die maxi, or if you're a Stuart Bitcoin Laser Eyes, Safe Dean, Austrian economics, can't spend what you don't have maxi like moi. And we'll see where everybody lands. I really think this kind of future forward thinking about Bitcoin as digital cash is super interesting, Jay. And I love having chats about sats because there's so much to Bitcoin that no two chats are the same. Even if you kind of cover the same ideas, it's always from a unique angle that is specific to that person. And it's so fascinating. I want to go back, Jay, to that time in your life after you had learned what Bitcoin is. I read the white paper. Okay, Satoshi says Bitcoin is electronic peer-to-peer cash. Here's the public-private key signing. Here's mining Bitcoin and issuing new coins. Here's the hash rate, all that. You said the next step was to figure out how you could trust Bitcoin or how it would be secure. What did you do to understand how you could trust Bitcoin or how it was secured?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think part of any proper analysis, right, is there's steps to it, right? The first step is, as you outlined, right, understanding what are the parts, what are the individual components, all right, and then once I understand the individual components, what's mining, what is public key, private key encryption, like what are all these little components, right? And then you assemble them together. And you're like, okay, this is what this thing is, right? But you don't know if that thing is good or bad, right? It's only in relation. You can only understand if that is an effective system or tool. It doesn't, and this is beyond Bitcoin, right? In comparison to something else, right? In comparison to the alternative. And so that's kind of where I went into a little bit of a rabbit hole on economics and economic theory and understanding, how different systems work, Keynesian versus Austrian, not Australian, Austrian. Yeah, just like understanding how that works and understanding how the current system is set up. And from there, once you understand, okay, this is what Bitcoin is, these are the other options, then what is the least worst option? Um, and yeah, and that's kind of how I was like, wow, Bitcoin's really cool. I really like Bitcoin. And that's true just for really anything in life. Like if you're trying to understand what car to buy, if you're trying to understand, what business to invest in, it's the same process. Understand the components. What are the fundamentals of how the thing works, and then how does that thing function in relationship to the other possibilities, and is that the best thing for that, what you want it to do? And so for Bitcoin, it's like, okay, it's deflationary. That's amazing. It's not controlled, like the amount of people that control the U.S. monetary supply is very few. I'm not going to give an exact number. I forget what it is, but you have the federal bank is manned by surprisingly few people, and they have the most say on how valuable your dollar is, and that's kind of crazy that we put all that power into one person or a few people's hands. So yeah, and then well, what are the alternatives? Well, there's Bitcoin or fiat, and I heard that fiat doesn't have great gas mileage.
No, it doesn't. You need more and more of it to take the same trip. Can you imagine being in a car, Jay, and you fill up your car with 20 gallons of gas, and that gets you from your house to your in-laws' house in the neighboring state, and then 5 years later, the 20 gallons of gas only gets you 75% of the way, and you have to stop and gas up another 7 gallons. 5 years later, the 20 gallons only gets you to the state line, and you got to put a whole nother tank in there. You'd be like, dude, what is going on? Mike, what is happening to this gasoline?
It's like
and then you get gasoline
through your fingers, right? Horrible.
And then you go to gasoline one day, and then they say, "I'm sorry, your social credit's too low. We can't give you gasoline." You're like, "How are these things related?" Wait, stop! No.
Exactly. You've been thumbs down online too much. And you can't get any gas at all. Or I was thinking about this on the way to the studio today. What if somebody gave me, of course, the example I always use is Chick-fil-A, because everybody eats it, of course, and I get my spicy chicken deluxe. What if I sat down to my spicy chicken deluxe with Chick-fil-A sauce, extra pickles, French fries, Dr. Pepper, and it gave me 1,500 calories worth of energy? 5 years from now, I sit down to the same exact meal. It only gives me 1,000 calories of energy, and I feel hungry. 5 years later, I sit down to the same meal. It only gives me 600 calories of energy. And I actually have to sit there. I have to eat 2 spicy chicken deluxe, extra pickle Chick-fil-A sauce, 2 fries, and 2 Dr. Pepper just to get the same amount of full. That would be insane. Mm-hmm. The world operates on resources that are real. This food gives you this amount of calories no matter what. Mm-hmm. It's literally worth that many calories. This gasoline gets you X amount of mileage depending on your car's efficiency, but that doesn't change, right? But the money does.
That's crazy.
So you talked about understanding that you could trust Bitcoin by examining other monetary systems. And which monetary systems did you review?
So the big ones, you have Keynesian, you have Austrian, and for listeners who know, or who don't know, Austrian economics is a more laissez-faire sort of system of thinking about economics. Of, hey, maybe the government shouldn't be involved in everything, and maybe we should have a currency that's backed by something that's more tangible. And Keynesian is more of it comes more from this idea that and it's really interesting if you look through history, because there's been this these two camps of thought, right? And Keynesian and Austrian is just one iteration of this idea that's gone back hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? You have the people that say, okay, the central planning types of people that say, okay, economics, the world, is just a system. If we understand all the right inputs, then we can perfectly plan the future, and we can make the perfect economy, right? And then you have the other school of thought that says you will never be able to understand enough information, and that it's best to give people the autonomy and the responsibility to act in the best interest, and that will be in the best interest of everybody. And of course, both systems have their upsides and downsides, but you see this sort of thinking all throughout history with all different types of systems and ideas that have been tried and failed, right? I mean, the classic one is the Soviet Union, right? Like they had a very top-down planning economy, and it turns out that they hate. There was just one really funny story when I think it was Nixon. I don't quote me. Maybe it was Reagan or Nixon, one of those two. And they were meeting with of some Russian diplomats, and the Russian diplomats made all these jokes about how chandelier makers were the worst people ever. They're like, and the president was like, okay, why do they hate chandelier makers? This makes no sense. So he had the CIA investigate why the Russian officials hate chandelier makers, and it turns out that in Russia, nails were made had a quota per ton of nail. Like you have to make X tons of nails, and so the manufacturers would just make these huge long nails, and they'd be used in chandeliers, and the chandeliers would fall down because they're made with nails there too. And so people in Russia hate chandeliers. Point being is that if you try to plan for every conceivable thing, you won't. There's nobody that can, and you'll end up with deadly chandeliers. So that's why I'm personally a fan of a more laissez-faire Austrian economics perspective of, hey, let people work in their own best interests. Let's create these decentralized systems where everybody who's working their own interest is keeping the network safe, keeping Bitcoin safe, making sure the economy is functioning. Don't outsource this to a few people in places of power. And I think that that's just the best way, and with obvious downsides, right? I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I think it's the least worst option that's available to us.
It sounds an awful lot like the values that the United States was founded on, right?
Let's hear it.
Well, I mean, freedom of speech, freedom of choice, free market economy. I hate to say the word capitalism because it's not a very popular term today, but let's let the market decide what the market wants, what the market will bear, as opposed to let's try to force fit what we believe the right solution for the market or for consumers is. How do we get into this position where we're all of a sudden our government is imposing solutions that prohibit the free market's operation, natural progression? How did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, I think it happened the same way it has happened for 4,000 years or more. And it's just like you said, people in power get the idea that economics is a concept or system over which they can exert some amount of control. They don't realize that economics is a force like gravity or the strong force or the weak force, right? They think they can say, I hereby decree that inside the lines of this nation state, objects will fall at a rate of 9.9 meters per second squared, not 9.8. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't care how much you decree that gravity will operate differently inside your nation state, it simply will not. the economy is a force of nature. It is a thing. It cannot be tampered with. And the more you let it run free, the more it will figure itself out. So I want to ask you one more question here, Jay, before we close out. You taught yourself about Bitcoin, about the basics, about what it really is. You reviewed different monetary systems. Here's how Bitcoin works. Here's how gold works. Here's how fiat works. Here's different economic systems, Keynesian, Austrian. And you determined that in relation to the options you have out there, Bitcoin's the best. But you also said that you're the first, or you will be the first, to point out that Bitcoin has some drawbacks. And you did try to help businesses. You did do the noble work, and all the satillionaires out there like and subscribe to thank this guy for the work he did in the trenches to try to accelerate Bitcoin's adoption as digital cash.
Yes. You
said there were some drawbacks. Last question I want to ask you, Jay, is what do you think those drawbacks are?
You guys have some great questions. I'd say that the drawbacks for Bitcoin, it goes back to kind of what I was saying about how people understand things based off of the problems that they're able to solve, or tools specifically, right? And Bitcoin is nothing but a really cool tool. And so depending on what you're trying to use that tool for, it will be better or worse. All right. So, if you're, trying to use a hammer to repair a computer, good luck, right? So I think that a lot of the limitations with Bitcoin comes to how you want to use it, right? Do you want to use it to pay for, pay for your groceries? Well, right now, that probably wouldn't be a really good use. Why? You have to spend a lot on transaction fees. Then you have to wait a few minutes for the transaction to be approved. And, I think that's not a great tool. Maybe you go off chain, use something like the Lightning Network, or, other options. But then that adds extra complexity. And when you're waiting in line to checkout, you don't want to be the guy holding up the line trying to figure out what side chain you want to be sending Bitcoin to, right?
I need 10 minutes. You might want to find a different aisle.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no one wants that. So yeah, I think that the other huge limitation, maybe this has been solved, but I haven't seen it being solved yet, is handling subscription payments. Because one of the awesome things with Bitcoin is that you have to authorize every transaction, and that's great. That's, I feel like, how it should be. But as someone who also builds apps for a living, you kind of need to have subscription payments. So, like, a lot of modern digital economies are based off of subscription payments. For example, Notion, or your Spotify or Netflix, or like all of these are subscription based, and I haven't seen the infrastructure that can easily facilitate subscription payments. And again, I think it's a bug and it's a feature, right? It's like, hey, it's more secure. Like, you kind of need, when you go into Bitcoin, you need to know what you're doing it for, right? Are you doing this to have a long-term store of value, which I think it's its ideal thing. I think it's ideally just, hey, I'm gonna store some gold, and I'm gonna buy some gold bars. I'm gonna put them in a safe. I'm gonna forget about them, and then they'll be worth 100 times what I paid for it in 20 years or something like that, or sooner, right? So I think really just, I think the limitations of Bitcoin are based off of how you want to use it, and I think that if you're trying to use it for the wrong thing, I think you're going to run into a lot of barriers. The other barrier is that, hey, maybe you don't want your entire financial history easily traceable on the blockchain. Maybe that's not something you want, right? But hey, there's other cryptocurrencies for that, and that's where a lot of these other cryptocurrencies have popped up to kind of fill, or altcoins, to fill the void that Bitcoin has. For example, if you want to have a little bit of privacy, not that you're doing anything illegal, but just privacy is neat. Maybe you use something like Monero, where you can't trace it. In fact, the IRS has an ongoing bounty that no one's claimed for the first person who can trace Monero transactions, and has not been claimed because Monero is that untraceable. And so yeah, it boils down to, how are you using it, And and if you're using it for the right things, I think it'll be great and it'll be amazing. But if you're using it for things that it's not great at, then you'll run into a lot of limitations.
I feel like this has been an outstanding chat about sats.
Incredible.
I feel like it's just so wonderful to have conversations with real people who have thought about Bitcoin, who are approaching it through their own lens and helping our satillionaires out there see just how much there is to Bitcoin. So to recap that conversation, we've got Jay. He spent some time watching his friends YOLO on some graphics cards to mine Bitcoin in 2017. He didn't say, but we know for a fact those friends are gone. They were mining Bitcoin at, 50 or 25 Bitcoin a block. They're jabillionaires. They're out of here. In fact, it's probably more likely that they sold it for stuff on the Silk Road or whatever and wrecked themselves. But it took Jay, just like everybody. Nobody can recognize Bitcoin the first time they look at it. A couple of years later, you start to learn more about Bitcoin for real. What is it? How does it compare to other monetary systems? I think I've got something on my hands here. I'm going to help Bitcoin be accepted in businesses as digital cash. You know what? I might have been too dang early on that one. Let's start Vasker Tech. And if you'll hit us, Jay, real quick with the website where everyone can go to engage in business with you.
Yeah. Just Vasker.tech, Vasker.tech. It's an old, Vasker is an old Norse word, misspelling of it, but it's an old Norse word that means brave and bold. And that's kind of what we try to do at Vasker Tech. We build awesome, cool applications because I think that it's just a whole lot of fun and we get to build cool stuff. And yeah, and we build it on time and on budget. And that's really rare in the software business, as I'm sure you guys might know.
Okay, let's go. So Jay, you probably don't know this about me. This, and I'll put it in front of the orange maybe you can see. This is Thor's hammer right here, my guy. Okay.
Sick.
Let's go.
Sick.
This is a t-shirt that says, "I'm just here for the school bread," which is a reference to the Norwegian pavilion at Epcot. And your boy's wedding ring is a bind rune tattooed onto his hand. Okay.
That is so cool.
Letting this lady go. Even she's like, let's go, dude.
Stuart's about as old Norse as you can get.
Hundo P. Vasker, let's go. So Vasker Tech, VASKER.tech for all your software development and app development needs, correct?
Absolutely.
We talked about how these different economic systems try to impose their will on everyone's individual day-to-day transactions, and it just doesn't work. So if you're looking for outsized return on investment with literally no work, buy Bitcoin and just hang out. If you want to use it as digital cash, there are some scenarios where that's good. There are some scenarios where that might be for a more advanced user currently at this stage. But as the volatility decreases, if it ever does, let's go. I hope it never does. Then it might be easier for folks to use as a digital cash. So we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, it might be a little early in the adoption curve, as Jay pointed out, but don't worry, it's coming.
So let's make Jay an offer.
No, that's me. All right, Jay. So in true Bitcoin culture values, right? Does that make sense?
The ethos of Bitcoin.
The ethos of Bitcoin. We believe in value for value. And you were gracious enough today to bless us and our audience with your time. And so in exchange for that, we want to give some value back to you. So what we like to ask each of our guests at the end of their episode is how they'd like to be compensated. And the choice is $50 in USD, nation state paper, but as you referred to USD, which that sounds great, or $50 in sats. And the price of Bitcoin right now, wow, has jumped a lot since this morning. It's at $99,530 per coin.
Real quick, I DCA'd this morning around the 95,000 mark. Let's go, Bitcoin. Well, love buying my Bitcoin.
Wow, nice work. And this translates into 1,005 sats per dollar.
So we're back above 1,000 sats per dollar, y'all. For the ones that have been listening. We've been at the 930 to 940 point for a week or so. So you're getting it good, my friend.
So the math here, okay, 50,250 sats or 50 USD. Unfortunately, we haven't figured out the whole, how do we get our virtual guest to try Ithaca hummus? So have you heard of Ithaca hummus?
I've not heard of Ithaca hummus.
You haven't heard of Ithaca hummus, but can he get Ithaca hummus where he lives?
Yeah. So what city, state? Are you in Seattle?
I'm in Portland.
Portland? Okay. So Safeway, Albertsons, Whole Foods, if you have a Sprouts nearby, any of the Kroger banners starting in the end of March. We're going to be in all the Krogers. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, Kroger has multiple brands, right? Like Harris Teeter and others.
Yeah. So
I'll have to look out for it and support my local Bitcoin bros.
Yeah, appreciate it. Awesome. Well, I think that's enough.
Okay.
Let's get back to the other choice.
You've got Ulysses S. Grant, aka USG, and he's repping the USD. We got USG on USD.
Oh.
We also got over 50,000 sats. We're back up over 50,000 sats.
It's a good day.
So do you want $50 that will likely buy you $20 worth of stuff later, or 50,250 sats that will guaranteed buy you more than $50 worth of stuff later?
I mean, we spent the whole conversation talking about how awesome Bitcoin is. Do you really need to ask?
Yeah, let's go. That's my boy. So
sats?
Yeah, absolutely.
Goes for the sats. And we do have to ask because number 9, Paul, a Bitcoiner, options day trader, he took the cash. And I literally, that's the first thing I think about every morning when I wake up. It's the last thing I think about every night when I go to sleep, is that number 9, Paul, took the cash. So that brings our scoreboard to 14-1. And we thank you, Jay, for your time today, for making the right choice out there for all the satillionaires who are wondering whether they need to get themselves some Bitcoin and start stacking sats. So for all the satillionaires out there watching this show, if you made it this far, please smash the like and subscribe button the same way Chris and number 14, Robert, smash buy the Bitcoin. Help us get to 999 plus 1 subscribers on YouTube.
That's 1,000.
Once we get there, we will unlock a live show Friday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern. Jay and the crew are going to jump in the chat. Jay's going to help us set up super chats via sats. Super chats. The Sicilianaires are going to be they're going to be zapping us with sats the whole time. It's going to be a lot of fun, but we can't do that. Daddy YouTube won't let us do that until we get to 1,000 subscribers and a certain number of hours watched. So run this show in the background, AFK on this show, like and subscribe on this show, and let us know in the comments what you thought about Jay's take on Bitcoin and whether you want to see him back in 9 months. So thanks again, Jay, for your time. Vasker Tech for your software and app development needs, VASKER.tech. And remember, Sat Chats is for educational purposes only and should not be construed as financial advice. Our guests' views are their own. See you on the next one.